The family gathering had been planned for months. Every year, my wife, Vanessa, and I would attend my parents' sprawling countryside estate, along with siblings, cousins, aunts, uncles, and the occasional family friend. It was meant to be a celebration of togetherness, a weekend filled with laughter, shared meals, and the comfort of familiar faces. But this year, everything felt off the moment we arrived. From the outset, Vanessa seemed distracted. She whispered into her phone, checked messages under the table, and laughed at jokes that I didn't hear. I brushed it off, attributing it to nerves or excitement at seeing distant relatives. But a small, persistent unease grew in my chest, the kind of premonition that settles quietly before a storm. Dinner began as usual. Platters of roasted meat, vegetables, and warm bread passed around the long dining table. My parents sat at the head, jovial and welcoming, sharing anecdotes about past holidays. My siblings and cousins exchanged playful banter, their voices weaving into a familiar symphony of family chatter. Vanessa, however, sat quietly, occasionally glancing at her phone with a smile I hadn't seen in months. Something about it felt wrong, though I couldn't yet place why. The moment that shattered the evening came during a casual conversation about family priorities. My father, as he often did, asked each of us to name the people who mattered most in our lives, a light-hearted game meant to spark laughter and reflection. My brother went first, listing his children, wife, and close friends. My sisters followed, their lists a mixture of immediate family and cherished relationships. When it was Vanessa's turn, she began to speak, and my stomach dropped as I listened. "I'd say the kids first," she said, smiling warmly, "and then maybe my parents, friends, and Jack, I guess." She said my name last, almost as an afterthought, her tone casual, her eyes avoiding mine. The words stung more than any argument or accusation could. 20 years of marriage, shared struggles, late nights, celebrations, and sacrifices reduced to the bottom of a casual list. I felt the room shift around me. Laughter, conversation, and background noise faded into a blur as the betrayal settled into my chest like a heavy stone. My heart pounded, my vision narrowed, and a cold wave of realization washed over me. This wasn't just a careless remark. It was the culmination of months of distance, deception, and secretive behavior I had tried to ignore. My wife had put me last, publicly, in front of the family. I excused myself quietly, leaving the dining room with trembling hands. The hallway was dimly lit, and I could hear Vanessa calling my name behind me. I ignored her. The betrayal felt too raw to address immediately. I retreated to the guest room, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed, trying to breathe, trying to comprehend the depth of what had just happened. Later, I overheard snippets of her conversation with a cousin, her laughter and flirtatious tone confirming what I had suspected for months. Vanessa had been seeing someone else, hiding it behind smiles, excuses, and casual neglect. The public slight at dinner was the tipping point, the final acknowledgement that our marriage had been compromised long before anyone at that table realized it. I confronted her in private, my voice quiet but steady, trying to maintain composure. "Vanessa, why did you put me last? Why have you been hiding things from me?" My words trembled with anger and hurt, but I controlled my tone, determined not to let my emotions dictate the conversation entirely. She tried to explain, to excuse her behavior, claiming stress, distraction, and a desire for independence. But the truth was undeniable. The lists, the messages, the secrecy, they all pointed to the same conclusion. She had emotionally and physically removed herself from our marriage, prioritizing others over the person who had stood beside her through every challenge. The weekend continued, but the joy and warmth of the family gathering were gone for me. I participated mechanically, smiled when appropriate, and engaged in polite conversation, but the emotional damage was irreparable. Every laugh Vanessa shared with others, every private glance, every message she received reminded me of the chasm that had opened between us. By the end of the gathering, I made a decision. I could no longer ignore the reality that our marriage had been compromised beyond repair. The public slight, coupled with months of deceit, demanded action. I began the process of separation, consulting legal counsel, documenting evidence, and establishing boundaries. The focus was on protecting myself, my emotional well-being, and any shared assets or responsibilities. In the weeks following, I experienced a range of emotions: grief, anger, disbelief, and a profound sense of loss. I mourned not only the relationship I had thought I had, but also the life and future we had planned together. Yet alongside the pain, I recognized the necessity of resilience, the importance of reclaiming agency over my life, and the need to define my identity outside of a marriage that had become toxic and untrustworthy. Therapy became a critical part of my recovery. I worked through the feelings of betrayal, the public humiliation, and the erosion of trust. I learned to process grief without allowing it to define me, to acknowledge the pain without letting it dictate my actions, and to cultivate self-respect and autonomy despite the heartbreak. Months later, Vanessa and I formally separated. The legal and logistical process was challenging, but it was necessary to establish clarity and boundaries. Our communication became functional rather than emotional, focused on resolving practical matters rather than rekindling any semblance of intimacy. The public embarrassment of the family gathering, while still painful, became a reference point, a moment that confirmed the reality I had been reluctant to fully acknowledge. As time passed, I began to rebuild my life. Friends, hobbies, work, and new routines provided stability and purpose. I discovered a renewed sense of independence, a clarity of identity, and an understanding of my own emotional needs that had been overshadowed by the demands and betrayals of marriage. The experience, while devastating, became a catalyst for growth, self-reflection, and empowerment. I realized that the act of being put last, publicly, by someone I had loved and trusted, was not merely a slight but a revelation. It exposed the depth of deception, the prioritization of others over our shared life, and the necessity of decisive action to protect myself. The humiliation, while painful, clarified the path forward and underscored the importance of personal boundaries, emotional resilience, and integrity. Years later, I can reflect on that family gathering with a sense of clarity and strength. The sadness of that evening, the sting of betrayal, and the weight of public humiliation have not disappeared entirely, but they no longer dominate my life. I rebuilt my identity, reclaimed my autonomy, and cultivated relationships grounded in trust and respect rather than obligation or habit. The story of being put last, publicly, by a cheating spouse is a painful one, but it also highlights the power of resilience, self-respect, and decisive action. Betrayal is never easy to process, and public humiliation compounds the emotional toll. Yet by confronting the reality, establishing boundaries, and prioritizing one's own well-being, it is possible to emerge stronger, wiser, and more capable of navigating life with integrity and confidence. Looking back, I understand that the family gathering, while devastating at the time, was a turning point. It revealed truths I had been reluctant to acknowledge, forced me to confront betrayal head-on, and set in motion the steps necessary to reclaim my life. Vanessa's priorities, laid bare in front of everyone, clarified the necessity of separation and personal empowerment. The memory remains vivid. The laughter, the subtle glances, the public act of placing me last. But it now serves as a reminder not of failure, but of awakening. Betrayal, exposure, and humiliation are painful, yet they can illuminate paths toward autonomy, emotional clarity, and resilience. The sadness of that audio story moment has been transformed over time into a narrative of strength, recovery, and self-determination. By choosing to act decisively, to protect my emotional and practical well-being, and to reclaim my identity. I turned a moment of public humiliation into a catalyst for profound personal growth. The family gathering, once a scene of heartbreak, has become a reference point, a marker of the transition from passive endurance of betrayal to active reclamation of life, dignity, and purpose.